The champagne flutes were arranged in a perfect pyramid. 367 glasses, to be exact. I'd counted them twice. The crystal caught the light from the Venetian chandeliers, casting rainbow prisms across the white marble floor of the Silverpeak Grand Resort's ballroom. Everything was perfect. Everything was controlled. Everything was exactly as it should be. Until he walked in. I noticed him immediately because he didn't belong. Not in this ballroom, not in this five-star luxury resort nestled in the Colorado Rockies, and definitely not in the owner's private executive lounge that I'd just spent the last 4 hours preparing for the International Alpha Summit. The man looked like he'd crawled out of the wilderness. His leather jacket was scuffed and torn at the shoulder, his dark jeans were caked with dried mud, and his boots, his combat boots, were leaving actual dirt tracks across my freshly polished Italian marble. I felt my left eye twitch. That specific twitch that only appeared when someone was actively destroying my hard work. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice echoing across the empty ballroom. I was still holding the clipboard that had become an extension of my arm over the past 6 years as senior event coordinator. "Sir, this is a restricted area." The man didn't even look at me. He just kept walking toward the executive lounge, his heavy boots thudding against the floor with each step. He was tall, impossibly tall, with broad shoulders that seemed to take up more space than physics should allow. His dark hair was wet, slicked back like he'd just walked through a rainstorm, though the evening had been perfectly clear. I abandoned my champagne pyramid and hurried after him, my heels clicking rapidly against the marble. "Sir," I said, "this area is restricted. The lounge doesn't open until tomorrow morning, and even then, you'll need proper credentials too." He pushed through the heavy oak doors of the executive lounge without breaking stride. My jaw dropped. I actually felt it fall open like a cartoon character. Nobody ignored me. Nobody. I ran the logistics for every major event at the Silverpeak Grand Resort. Diplomats listened to me. Celebrities followed my directions. And this muddy vagrant had just walked past me like I was invisible. I stormed through the doors after him, ready to unleash 6 years of hospitality industry rage. The executive lounge was my masterpiece. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the snow-capped Rocky Mountains, where elk grazed in the valleys below. The furniture had been imported from France, hand-selected by the owner himself, Alpha King Garrett. Rich navy velvet couches, mahogany tables with gold inlay, and a fully stocked bar that contained bottles worth more than my yearly salary. And this man, this absolute disaster of a human being, had collapsed onto the prize piece, a custom chaise lounge that cost more than a luxury car. He'd thrown his muddy boots up onto the coffee table, crossed his ankles, and was currently helping himself to the private reserve bourbon. "Get out," I said. My voice came out low and dangerous. I could feel my wolf stirring beneath my skin, responding to my anger. "Get out right now before I call security." Welcome to Floxy's Shifter Romance Tales. Before we dive in, I'd love your support. Kindly hit the likes button and let the story hit 200 likes. Also, subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me where you're listening from. Your engagement means the world to me. Now let's begin. He took a long drink of the bourbon, straight from the bottle, and finally looked at me. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, dark gray shot through with silver. They were beautiful. They were also currently filled with amused disdain. "You have a very aggressive energy for someone so small," he said. His voice was deep, rough around the edges like gravel in a cement mixer. "I like it." "I don't care what you like," I snapped back, marching up to him with my clipboard held like a weapon. "You have exactly 30 seconds to get your filthy boots off that table and your unwashed body out of this lounge before I have you physically removed from the premises." He raised one dark eyebrow. 30 seconds? That's very specific. Do you always count down before you attack, or is that just for trespassers? 25 seconds, I said through gritted teeth. He sat up slightly, and I had to force myself not to take a step back. Up close, he was even bigger than I'd realized. His presence filled the room, made the air feel heavier. There was something dangerous about him, something wild that made my instincts scream at me to run. But I'd never run from anything in my life, and I wasn't about to start now. "You know," he said conversationally, setting the bourbon bottle down on the mahogany table without a coaster, Most people who see me react very differently. They usually freeze. Sometimes they bow. But you're threatening me with math. 15 seconds, I said, pulling my radio from my belt. And I don't care how most people react to you. In this hotel, I'm in charge of logistics, which means I'm in charge of removing obstacles. And right now, you're an obstacle. Something flickered in those storm gray eyes. Interest, maybe. Or hunger. It made my skin prickle with awareness. I'm an obstacle, he repeated slowly, like he was tasting the words. That's a new one. 10 seconds. He stood up. I had to crane my neck back to look at him. He had to be 6'6", maybe taller. The leather jacket he wore was open, revealing a black t-shirt that clung to a chest that looked carved from stone. He smelled like rain and pine trees and something wild, something that made my wolf whine with recognition. I shoved that feeling down deep and raised my radio to my lips. Don't, he said softly. It wasn't a threat. It was almost gentle. You really don't want to do that. 5 seconds, I said, and pressed the call button. Security, this is Skylar in the executive lounge. I have an unauthorized individual who needs immediate removal. Send a team to the Beta Jackson, a rough voice crackled through the radio. We're on our way. The man in front of me sighed and ran a hand through his damp hair. You're going to feel very embarrassed in about 60 seconds. The only thing I'm going to feel is satisfaction when security drags you out the service entrance, I shot back. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and 4 massive security guards in tactical gear poured into the lounge. Beta Jackson led the pack, a mountain of a man who'd worked security at the resort for 15 years. I'd seen him break up fights between drunk shifters twice his size without breaking a sweat. There, I said, pointing at the muddy intruder with my clipboard. Remove him immediately. He's contaminating the executive lounge and drinking the owner's private reserve. The security guards stopped dead. Their faces went pale. And then, in perfect synchronization, all 4 of them dropped to one knee and lowered their heads. My mouth went dry. No, I whispered. No, you're supposed to remove him, not... Your Majesty, Beta Jackson said, his voice rough with respect and fear. We apologize for the intrusion. We weren't informed of your early arrival. The room tilted. My clipboard slipped from my numb fingers and clattered against the marble floor. The man, the vagrant, the muddy disaster I'd just threatened to remove, turned back to me with a slow, predatory smile. I tried to warn you, Alpha King Garrett said softly. But you were too busy counting down. I couldn't breathe. The air in the executive lounge had turned to concrete, filling my lungs with crushing weight. 4 security guards remained kneeling, their heads bowed, while I stood frozen like a malfunctioning robot. Alpha King Garrett. The actual Alpha King Garrett. The owner of the Silverpeak Grand Resort chain. The most powerful shifter in the western United States. The man whose photograph hung in the administrative offices, always looking polished and professional in custom 3-piece suits. That man was currently standing in front of me in muddy combat boots and a ripped leather jacket, looking like he'd just finished fighting a war in the wilderness. Jackson, the king said, not taking his eyes off me, you and your team can leave. I believe MS. He paused, his gaze dropping to my name badge. Miss Skylar and I need to have a conversation about hospitality standards. Yes, Your Majesty, Jackson stammered. He shot me a look that was equal parts pity and terror before scrambling to his feet. The other guards followed suit, and they practically fled from the lounge. The doors clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed was suffocating. So, the king said, walking back to the chaise lounge and settling onto it like a throne, you wanted to have me removed from my own property. That takes courage. Or stupidity. I haven't decided which yet. My brain finally rebooted. Years of professional training kicked in, overriding my panic. I bent down, picked up my clipboard with trembling hands, and straightened my blazer. When I stood back up, I forced myself to meet his eyes. Your Majesty, I said, my voice only shaking a little, I apologize for not recognizing you. However, in my defense, you don't look anything like your official photographs, and you weren't scheduled to arrive until tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. The executive lounge wasn't prepared for your arrival, and the proper protocols weren't. Are you actually lecturing me about protocols? He interrupted, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I just watched you threaten to have me thrown out of my own hotel, and your first instinct is to explain why it's technically my fault? I'm not saying it's your fault, I argued, then caught myself. I mean, I'm not making excuses. I'm simply stating the facts. If you had informed the management team of your early arrival, proper security measures would have been in place, and this misunderstanding could have been avoided. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he started laughing. It was a deep, rich sound that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards and straight into my chest. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It sounded almost delighted. You're still doing it, he said, shaking his head. Even after you know who I am, you're still correcting me. Do you have a death wish, Miss Skylar? I have a professional commitment to efficiency and proper procedure, I said stiffly. Death wishes are not on my agenda. He studied me with those unsettling storm gray eyes, and I felt like he was peeling back layers, seeing things I kept carefully hidden. My wolf was pacing now, agitated and confused. She wanted to submit to this powerful alpha. She also wanted to bite him for tracking mud across our clean floor. It was very confusing. Why were you here so late? He asked suddenly, changing direction. It's almost midnight. The summit doesn't start until day after tomorrow. The summit requires precise coordination, I explained, grateful for the shift to professional topics. The champagne pyramid alone took 3 hours to construct. The floral arrangements need to be assembled tomorrow morning before the heat ruins the roses. The seating chart has been revised 14 times to account for territorial disputes and pack politics. And someone, I added pointedly, needs to clean the mud tracks you left across the ballroom floor before the delegates arrive. You counted the champagne glasses, didn't you? He said. I lifted my chin. 367 glasses arranged in a perfect pyramid according to structural engineering principles. It took precise calculations too. You're adorable, he interrupted. I blinked. Excuse me? Adorable, he repeated, standing up and walking toward me with that predatory grace that made my hindbrain scream warnings. You're standing here, in the middle of the night, defending your champagne pyramid to a king who could fire you with a single word. And instead of begging for mercy, you're explaining structural engineering. I don't beg, I said automatically. His eyes flashed silver. We'll see about that. The air between us suddenly felt charged, electric. I took a step back, bumping into the bar cart. Your Majesty, I said, desperately trying to re-establish professional boundaries, I should go. You probably want to rest after your travels, and I need to arrange for housekeeping to clean this lounge before. Sit down, he said. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute command. My body moved before my brain could protest, sinking into the nearest chair. I felt my wolf roll over in submission, and I hated it. I hated that he could do that, could make me obey with just his voice. He noticed my expression, and something softened in his face. That was unfair, he admitted, pouring 2 glasses of the expensive bourbon. I apologize. I don't usually throw alpha commands around like that. But you were about to run, and I'm not done talking to you. He handed me one of the glasses. I took it on autopilot. I'm not running, I lied. I'm being efficient with my time. You're terrified, he corrected, settling into the chair across from me. You think I'm going to fire you for doing your job. You think this whole night is going to end with you in the unemployment line. He wasn't wrong. Are you? I asked quietly. Going to fire me? He took a long drink of his bourbon, considering. That depends. On what? On whether you can handle what I'm about to ask you to do. I gripped my glass tighter. I can handle anything professionally relevant to my position as senior event coordinator. Good, he said, setting his glass down on the table. Still without a coaster. Because starting tomorrow morning, you're not the senior event coordinator anymore. My heart sank. This was it. The firing I'd been expecting. You're being promoted, he continued, and my brain short-circuited. To my personal attaché for the duration of the summit. I don't understand, I said slowly. It's simple, he explained, leaning back in his chair. I hate these summits. I hate the politics, the posturing, the endless meetings where nothing gets accomplished. I hate making small talk with alphas who are only interested in forming alliances or selling me their daughters. And I especially hate the alphas who try to challenge my authority in front of an audience. He fixed me with those intense storm gray eyes. But you, Miss Skylar, you challenged me without even knowing who I was. You stood your ground, threatened me with security, and lectured me about protocols. You treated me like an obstacle to be removed, not a king to be feared. And I haven't felt that refreshed in years. So you want me to, what? Insult you in public? I asked, completely lost. No, he said with a slight smile. I want you to be my shield. I want you to stand between me and all the people I can't stand. I want you to tell duchesses their perfume is giving you migraines. I want you to inform counts that they're violating fire codes. I want you to do exactly what you did tonight, enforce your rules with ruthless efficiency, except this time, you'll be doing it on my behalf. I stared at him. You want me to be rude to visiting dignitaries? I want you to be honest, he corrected. I want you to treat everyone the same way you treated me, like they're subject to your standards, not the other way around. In exchange, I won't fire you for threatening your king. I'll pay you triple your current salary and give you whatever resources you need to keep this summit running smoothly. It was insane. It was professional suicide. It was also the most interesting offer I'd ever received. I have conditions, I heard myself say. His eyes lit up with something dangerous and exciting. Name them. First, you clean your boots before entering any event space. I don't care if you're the king. Mud is mud. He nodded slowly. Agreed. Second, you follow my schedule. If I say you have a meeting at 9 a.m., you're there at 9 a.m. No arguments, no excuses. Reasonable. Third, I said, meeting his gaze steadily, you don't use alpha commands on me again. Ever. I don't care how powerful you are. I won't be controlled like a puppet. Something fierce and approving flashed across his face. Deal, he said, extending his hand. Do we have an agreement, Miss Skylar? I looked at his hand. Large, scarred, powerful. This was a terrible idea. This was going to blow up in my face spectacularly. But I'd spent 6 years playing it safe, following every rule, maintaining perfect professional distance. Maybe it was time to be a little reckless. I reached out and shook his hand. The moment our skin touched, electricity shot up my arm. Not static. Something deeper, more primal. My wolf howled with recognition, and from the way his pupils dilated, his wolf felt it too. The mate bond. We both jerked our hands back at the same time. That was... He started. Nothing, I said quickly, standing up so fast I knocked over my chair. That was nothing. Static electricity from the carpet. I should go. Long day tomorrow. Lots to prepare. Your Majesty. Sir. I'll see you at breakfast. I was babbling. I never babbled. I practically ran for the door. Skylar, he called after me. I stopped but didn't turn around. 8 a.m., he said softly. Be here at 8. We have a lot to discuss. I fled. I didn't sleep. How could I sleep when my entire world had shifted on its axis in the span of 20 minutes? I'd felt the mate bond. The actual, unmistakable mate bond. With the Alpha King. With my boss. With the man I'd threatened to have thrown out of his own hotel. This was a disaster. At 7:30 a.m., I stood in front of my closet, staring at my collection of practical blazers and sensible skirts. Everything was beige or navy or black. Everything was safe. Everything screamed, please don't notice me. I grabbed the navy blazer. The safe choice. Then I remembered the look in his eyes when I'd challenged him. The way he'd called me adorable with something that sounded like respect. I put the navy blazer back and pulled out the deep emerald green dress I'd bought 2 years ago and never worn. It had a high neckline and long sleeves, perfectly professional. But it also fit like it had been tailored to my body, and the color made my dark skin glow. I was not doing this to impress him, I told myself firmly while applying makeup. I was doing this because I'd been promoted. New position, new look. That was all. My wolf laughed at me. At exactly 8 a.m., I knocked on the door to the executive lounge. Enter, his voice called from inside. I pushed through the doors and stopped short. The lounge had been transformed overnight. The mud was gone. The furniture had been rearranged. And there was a full breakfast spread laid out on the dining table by the windows, fresh fruit, pastries, eggs, bacon, and coffee that smelled like heaven. Alpha King Dante stood by the window, silhouetted against the morning sun. He'd showered and changed. The muddy vagrant was gone, replaced by a man in perfectly tailored black slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. His dark hair was still slightly damp, curling at the ends. He looked like sin wrapped in expensive cotton. "You're punctual," he said, turning to face me. His eyes traveled over my dress, lingering just long enough to make heat rise in my cheeks. "And you didn't wear beige. I'm impressed." "Punctuality is a basic professional courtesy," I said, walking to the table with my head held high. "And my wardrobe choices are none of your concern." "Everything about you is my concern now," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "You're my attaché. That means I need to know how you think, how you work, and what makes you tick." I sat down carefully, too aware of how close he was standing. "You don't need to know anything personal to work with me effectively. I'm a professional. I show up, I do my job excellently, and I go home. That's all you need to know." He sat across from me and poured coffee into both our cups. "Milk? Sugar?" "Black," I said. "Of course you drink it black," he murmured. "Efficient. No complications." "Complications waste time," I agreed, accepting the cup. "Speaking of which, I've reviewed your schedule for the summit. You have 17 meetings scheduled, 4 formal dinners, 3 press conferences, and 12 individual sessions with visiting alphas. I've reorganized the sequence to minimize travel time and maximize efficiency." I pulled out my tablet and slid it across the table. "I've also prepared briefing files on each alpha attending. Their pack dynamics, recent political moves, known alliances, and potential pressure points. If someone tries to manipulate you during negotiations, you'll see it coming." He picked up the tablet, scrolling through my notes. His expression shifted from impressed to something darker, more intense. "You did all this last night?" he asked. "After our encounter?" "I don't sleep much," I said, which was true. "And preparation is the key to success." "You didn't sleep because of the mate bond," he said bluntly. I choked on my coffee. "We're not discussing that," I said when I could breathe again. That was a momentary anomaly. Static electricity. Exhaustion. "We're both under a lot of stress with the summit approaching." "Amara," he said, setting down the tablet. "I've lived for 247 years. I know what a mate bond feels like." And that was the real thing. "Then we ignore it," I said firmly. "I'm not interested in being anyone's mate, especially not someone I work for. Mate bonds are messy and complicated and completely unprofessional. I've built my entire career on maintaining proper boundaries. I'm not throwing that away because of biology." "You're scared," he observed. "I'm practical," I corrected. Mate bonds fail. People fall out of love. And when they do, someone always gets hurt. I don't have time for hurt. I have a job to do." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those unnerving eyes. "Who hurt you?" "Excuse me?" "Someone hurt you badly enough that you've built a wall around yourself so high I can barely see the top." "Who was it?" "That's not appropriate," I said, standing up. "We should review the schedule for." "Sit down, Amara." It wasn't an alpha command, but it carried weight nonetheless. I sat, more out of surprise than obedience. "If we're going to work together closely for the next week," he said gently, "we need to establish trust. And trust requires honesty. So I'll go first." He took a deep breath. "My parents had a political mating. No bond, no love, just duty. I watched them destroy each other for 200 years. My mother took lovers to spite my father. My father buried himself in work to avoid my mother. When they finally died in battle, I think they were both relieved. I swore I would never mate unless it was a true bond. And here you are, my true mate, telling me you'd rather ignore it than risk getting hurt." The raw pain in his voice hit me like a physical blow. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "That must have been difficult to watch." "It was hell," he agreed. "But it taught me something important. Half measures don't work. You either commit completely or you walk away. There's no middle ground." "Then we walk away," I said. "The mate bond doesn't mean we have to act on it. We can be professional colleagues. Nothing more." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Is that really what you want?" "No," my wolf howled. "Touch him. Claim him. He's ours. Yes, I lied. That's what I want. Then we have a problem, he said, standing up and walking around the table toward me. Because I don't believe you. I think you want this just as much as I do. But you're too scared to admit it. He stopped behind my chair. I could feel the heat radiating off him, smell that intoxicating scent of rain and pine. Prove it, he whispered, his breath stirring my hair. Look me in the eyes and tell me you don't feel anything when I'm near you. I stood up and turned to face him, tilting my head back to meet his gaze. We were inches apart. One small step and we'd be touching. I don't feel anything, I said clearly. His hand came up, cupping my jaw gently. His thumb traced over my lower lip, and I shivered despite myself. Liar, he breathed. The door to the lounge burst open. Your Majesty. A woman in a gray suit rushed in, clutching a phone. Emergency. Alpha Constantine arrived early, and he's demanding an immediate audience. He's threatening to leave if you don't meet with him within the hour. The spell broke. Dante stepped back, his hand falling away. The loss of contact felt like being doused in cold water. Alpha Constantine, I said, switching instantly into professional mode. The Russian Alpha. He's notorious for power plays and intimidation tactics. This is a test to see if you'll bend to his demands. What do you recommend? Dante asked, his voice all business now. Make him wait, I said without hesitation. See him at 11 a.m. as originally scheduled. If he leaves, it's his loss, not yours. Never reward bad behavior. The woman in gray looked horrified. But Your Majesty, if he leaves. Then he leaves, Dante said, his eyes never leaving mine. Amara is right. Reschedule him for 11. And inform him that any future early arrivals will result in longer wait times. The woman bowed and fled. Dante grinned at me. That was incredibly hot. That was professional advice, I corrected, picking up my tablet. And we're going to be late for your security briefing if we don't leave now. Amara, he said as I headed for the door. I paused. This conversation isn't over. I didn't respond. I just kept walking. Because he was right. This conversation was far from over. And I was terrified of how it would end. By 11 a.m., I'd successfully navigated 3 near disasters. A kitchen fire that threatened the lunch service, a dispute between the Nigerian and Ghanaian delegations over seating arrangements, and a missing shipment of ceremonial wine that turned out to be stuck in customs. I was running on 4 hours of sleep over the past 2 days and approximately 7 cups of coffee. My emerald dress had a small burn mark from the kitchen fire that I'd covered with my blazer. And I was about to face Alpha Constantine, who was reportedly 6'8", 250 years old, and had a temper that made grizzly bears look cuddly. Perfect. Remember, I said to Dante as we walked toward the private conference room, he's going to try to intimidate you. Don't let him. Hold eye contact, speak calmly, and if he makes unreasonable demands, refer him to me. I'll be the bad guy. You're enjoying this, Dante observed. I'm good at my job, I corrected. There's a difference. The conference room doors opened, and I got my first look at Alpha Constantine. The reports hadn't exaggerated. He was massive, built like a tank, with ice blue eyes and platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. He was flanked by 4 equally large bodyguards. He looked at Dante, then his gaze slid to me. His lip curled in disdain. You brought your secretary to a private meeting, he said in heavily accented English. How very democratic of you. Ms. Amara is my personal attaché, Dante said smoothly, gesturing me toward the chair beside him. She handles all my scheduling and negotiations. Anything you want to say to me, you can say in front of her. Constantine's eyes narrowed. I do not negotiate with staff. Then you don't negotiate with me, Dante said pleasantly. Amara stays or you leave. Your choice. The Russian Alpha's face turned an impressive shade of red. His bodyguards tensed, hands moving toward weapons. I stood up, walked calmly to the bar cart, and poured 2 glasses of vodka. Russian vodka, specifically, from Constantine's own territory. I'd done my research. Alpha Constantine, I said, carrying the glasses over and setting one in front of him. You're right to be offended. In traditional pack dynamics, staff shouldn't be present at leadership meetings. But we're not in a traditional pack setting. We're at an international summit where 40 different packs with 40 different traditions are trying to work together. Flexibility is required. I sat down across from him, meeting his ice blue glare steadily. You're here because you want access to the West African trade routes. King Dante controls those routes. He's willing to negotiate, but only with people who respect the rules of his territory. In his territory, I have authority. If that's unacceptable to you, there are several other alphas downstairs who would be happy to take your place at this table. The room went silent. Even Dante looked surprised. Constantine stared at me for a long, tense moment. Then he picked up the vodka glass and downed it in one swallow. You have spine, little wolf, he said, slamming the glass down. I like this. We negotiate. The next hour was brutal. Constantine wanted concessions that would have gutted Dante's profit margins. I countered every demand with data, market analysis, and alternative proposals. We argued about percentages and timelines and shipping routes. Dante mostly sat back and watched, occasionally stepping in when Constantine tried to push too hard. By the time Constantine's team left, we'd hammered out a preliminary agreement that was actually fair to both sides. That was, Dante said as the door closed behind the Russians. Exhausting, I finished, slumping in my chair. I need more coffee. I was going to say impressive, he said. You went head-to-head with one of the most dangerous alphas in Europe, and you won. I didn't win. We both won. That's how good negotiations work. He walked over to where I was sitting and held out his hand. Come on. We have 2 hours before the next meeting. You need to eat. I looked at his hand, remembering the electric shock from last night. I'm fine. I'll grab something from the kitchen. Amara, he said patiently, you're about to pass out from exhaustion and caffeine overdose. Let me buy you lunch. You own the hotel. Everything here is technically already yours. Then let me provide you with lunch that I technically already own, he amended. Stop being stubborn. Against my better judgment, I took his hand. The spark was still there, but less shocking this time. More of a warm hum that traveled up my arm and settled in my chest. He led me to the private rooftop garden, a space reserved exclusively for the owner. It was beautiful, all flowering vines and comfortable seating arranged around a small fountain. A table had been set up with a light lunch, grilled fish, fresh salad, and fruit. When did you arrange this? I asked. I texted my assistant during the Constantine meeting, he said, pulling out a chair for me. You were too busy destroying a Russian warlord to notice. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The afternoon sun was warm, and the sound of the fountain was soothing. I could feel the tension draining from my shoulders. Can I ask you something personal? Dante said eventually. I tensed. Depends on the question. Why do you work so hard? You're obviously brilliant. You could work anywhere, for anyone. Why stay here, managing events and putting up with entitled alphas? I set down my fork, considering how much to tell him. My parents died when I was 16, I said finally. Car accident. They left me with nothing but debt. I had to drop out of school, get a job, figure out how to survive. This hotel gave me a chance when no one else would. I started as a housekeeper, worked my way up to front desk, then events coordinator, then senior coordinator. Every promotion was earned. Every skill was learned. I built myself from nothing. I looked at him directly. That's why I work so hard. Because everything I have, I made myself. And I'm not going to lose it. His expression had gone soft, almost tender. You won't lose it, Amara. I promise you that. You can't promise that, I said. Life doesn't work that way. Things fall apart. People leave. The only thing you can control is yourself and your work. Is that why you won't accept the mate bond? He asked quietly. Because you can't control it? I looked away, focusing on the fountain. The mate bond is a biological imperative. It's not a choice. And I've spent my entire adult life making my own choices, building my own life. I'm not ready to hand that over to fate or destiny or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be about handing anything over, he said. It could be about building something together, combining our strengths. Or it could be about losing everything when it falls apart, I countered. I've seen it happen. Mate bonds fail. People change. And I don't have the luxury of recovering from that kind of devastation. Before he could respond, my radio crackled to life. Ms. Amara, we have a situation in the main ballroom. The Duchess of Calabar is demanding to speak with you immediately. I stood up, grateful for the interruption. Duty calls. We're not done talking about this, Dante said. Yes, we are, I replied, already heading for the door. We're colleagues. That's all we need to be. I could feel his eyes on my back as I left. And I could feel my wolf howling in protest. The Duchess of Calabar turned out to be a nightmare wrapped in designer silk. She was furious because her suite didn't have a view of the ocean, never mind that her original reservation had specifically requested a garden view. She demanded I personally upgrade her to the royal suite, which was currently occupied by Alpha Constantine. I spent 3 hours negotiating, compromising, and ultimately arranging for renovations to her current suite that would give her a partial ocean view by removing some decorative screens. It cost a fortune. It violated several building codes that would need to be addressed immediately. And it made her happy. By the time I finished, it was past 8 p.m. The opening gala was starting in 2 hours, and I still needed to shower, change, and do a final walkthrough of the ballroom. I was heading back to my office when I noticed the box. It was sitting on my desk, large and elegant, wrapped in midnight blue paper with a silver ribbon. There was no card, but I knew who it was from. I could smell his scent on it, faint but unmistakable. My hands shook slightly as I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside was the most beautiful dress I'd ever seen. It was deep sapphire blue silk that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The cut was elegant but daring, a sweetheart neckline and a fitted bodice that flared into a flowing skirt with a high slit. It was the kind of dress that would make people stop and stare. The kind of dress that screamed confidence and power. The kind of dress I would never buy for myself. Underneath the dress was a note in bold, masculine handwriting. You've been hiding behind beige blazers long enough. Wear this tonight. Show them who you really are. D. I should have sent it back. I should have worn my safe black cocktail dress and my comfortable heels. I should have maintained my professional boundaries. Instead, I took the dress home and put it on. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Dante probably had access to my measurements from the employee files. The silk felt like water against my skin, cool and luxurious. And when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked powerful. I looked dangerous. I looked like someone who could stand next to a king and not feel small. My wolf purred with approval. I almost changed back into the black dress 3 times. But every time I reached for the zipper, I remembered the way Dante had looked at me in the emerald dress that morning. Not like I was his employee or his convenience. Like I was someone worth noticing. I left my hair down, falling in loose waves around my shoulders instead of my usual tight bun. I put on makeup that enhanced rather than hid. And I slipped into heels that added 3 inches to my height and made my legs look endless. When I walked into the ballroom at exactly 9:55 p.m., the room fell silent. Every head turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. I could feel dozens of eyes tracking my movement as I walked toward the main floor. And then I saw him. Dante was standing near the bar, surrounded by a group of elderly Alpha Council members. He looked devastating in a custom tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean waist. He was nodding politely at something one of the councilmen was saying, looking bored and restrained. Then he felt me. I saw it happen. His head snapped up, his nostrils flared, and his eyes found me across the crowded room. The boredom vanished. His expression shifted into something raw and hungry and possessive. He abandoned the councilman without a word, cutting through the crowd with single-minded determination. People scrambled out of his way. He didn't notice. His eyes were locked on mine. He stopped in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. You wore it, he said, his voice rough. It seemed rude to waste such an expensive gesture, I replied, trying to sound professional despite my racing heart. You're the most beautiful thing in this room, he said, not bothering to lower his voice. Several nearby guests turned to stare. Your Majesty, I hissed, people are watching. Let them watch, he said. He extended his hand. Dance with me. I should be working. I need to check that the catering schedule is. Dance with me, Amara, he repeated. It wasn't a command. It was a request. But the intensity in his eyes made it impossible to refuse. I placed my hand in his. The electric spark was immediate, stronger than before. He led me onto the dance floor, and the orchestra smoothly transitioned into a waltz. His hand settled on my waist, burning through the thin silk. His other hand engulfed mine, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. We began to move, and I followed his lead instinctively, like we'd been dancing together for years. "You're trying to prove a point," I said quietly as we spun across the floor. "I'm claiming what's mine," he corrected. "I'm not yours." "Your wolf disagrees," he murmured, pulling me closer. I can feel her calling to my wolf. The bond gets stronger every time we touch. He was right. My wolf was practically singing, begging me to close the distance, to accept what he was offering. "This is a mistake," I whispered. "Then it's my favorite mistake," he replied. The song ended. We stood frozen in the middle of the dance floor, his arms still around me, my hands resting on his chest. I could feel his heart hammering beneath my palms, as fast as mine. "Your Majesty," a cold female voice interrupted. We both turned. A tall, elegant woman in a white gown was standing at the edge of the dance floor, her expression icy. I recognized her immediately from my briefing files, Lady Zara of the Sahara Pack, one of the wealthiest and most powerful alphas in North Africa. "Lady Zara," Dante said, stepping back from me but keeping one hand on my waist. "I didn't realize you'd arrived." "Clearly," she said, her gaze sweeping over me with disdain. "I've been trying to get your attention for the past hour, but you seemed occupied." She looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "I'm Lady Zara." "And you are?" "Amara," I said calmly. "King Dante's personal attaché." "How interesting," she said, though her tone made it clear she found it anything but. I wasn't aware the king needed a babysitter. I felt Dante tense beside me, but I squeezed his hand gently. This was my job now. "Not a babysitter," I corrected pleasantly. "An organizational specialist. I manage the king's schedule and ensure his time is used efficiently." "Speaking of which, Your Majesty, you have an early meeting tomorrow morning. We should probably call it a night soon." It was a polite dismissal, and everyone knew it. Lady Zara's eyes flashed with anger. "Perhaps the king can make his own decisions about when he retires for the evening." Perhaps, I agreed. But managing his schedule is literally my job. And right now, his schedule says he needs rest. "Actually," Dante said, his arm tightening around my waist, "my attaché is right. As usual." "Lady Zara, we'll have to catch up tomorrow during the council session. Amara, shall we?" He guided me away from the fuming noblewoman, leaving her standing alone on the dance floor. "That was risky," he murmured as we walked toward the exit. "She's going to make your life difficult now." "Let her try," I said. "I've dealt with worse." We stepped out onto the terrace, escaping the crowded ballroom. The night air was cool against my heated skin, and the sound of the ocean was soothing after the noise of the party. "You're not afraid of anything, are you?" Dante asked, leaning against the railing. "I'm afraid of plenty of things," I admitted. "I'm just good at hiding it." "What are you afraid of right now?" I looked at him, really looked at him. In the moonlight, he looked younger, less like a king and more like a man. A man who was looking at me like I was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. "This," I said honestly. "I'm afraid of this. Of you. Of the way I feel when you're near me. I'm afraid that if I let myself want you, I'll lose everything I've built." He pushed off the railing and walked toward me slowly, giving me time to move away if I wanted to. I didn't move. "What if you don't lose anything?" he said softly. "What if you gain everything?" "That's not how life works for people like me," I said. "I don't get fairy tale endings." "You're wrong," he said, reaching up to cup my face in his hands. "You deserve every good thing this world has to offer. You deserve to be cherished and protected and loved. And I want to be the one who gives you those things." "Dante." I breathed. "I know you're scared," he said, his thumb stroking my cheekbones. "I know you think this will destroy you. But I promise you, Amara, I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that you can trust me. That we can build something beautiful together. If you'll just give me a chance." I looked up into those amber eyes, and I saw my future. Not the safe, controlled future I'd planned. A wild, chaotic, beautiful future full of possibility. My wolf howled with joy. "One chance," I whispered. "Don't make me regret it." He smiled, brilliant and fierce. "Never." And then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was claiming, possessive, overwhelming. His mouth moved over mine like he was trying to memorize the taste of me. I kissed him back just as fiercely, my hands fisting in his tuxedo jacket, pulling him closer. The mate bond exploded between us, a golden thread that tied my soul to his, permanent and unbreakable. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the world had shifted. "Mine," he growled against my lips. "Ours," I corrected breathlessly. He laughed, the sound full of joy and relief and triumph. "I'm never letting you go." "Good," I said, surprising myself. "Because I'm not going anywhere." We stood there on the terrace, wrapped in each other's arms, the sounds of the gala fading into background noise. Tomorrow, there would be meetings and negotiations and Lady Zara's revenge. Tomorrow, I would have to figure out how to balance being his mate with being his attaché. But tonight, for the first time in my carefully controlled life, I let myself just feel. And it was perfect. 6 months later, I stood in the same executive lounge where I'd first threatened to remove the Alpha King from his own property. But everything was different now. The lounge had been redecorated according to my specifications, more efficient furniture arrangement, better lighting, and absolutely no coffee tables where muddy boots could be propped. I was wearing another dress Dante had chosen for me, this one a stunning emerald green that he said matched my eyes when I was angry. My hair was down, my confidence was up, and I was currently in the middle of negotiating a treaty between 3 previously warring packs. Dante sat beside me, his hand resting possessively on my thigh under the table, his thumb drawing lazy circles that made it very hard to concentrate on tariff rates. "Ms. Amara makes an excellent point," Alpha Chin of the Eastern Pack said, reviewing the contract I'd drafted. "These terms are fair to all parties." "She usually does," Dante said proudly. "My mate is brilliant." I shot him a look that said stop bragging about me during negotiations, but he just grinned, unrepentant. The treaty was signed. The visiting alphas left. And finally, we were alone. "You're getting better at this," I said, starting to gather up the paperwork. "Better at what?" he asked, pulling me into his lap. "At not interfering when I'm working," I said, even as I relaxed into his embrace. "You only interrupted me 3 times today." "That's a new record." "I contained myself admirably," he agreed, nuzzling my neck. "I deserve a reward." "You deserve to help me file these contracts," I corrected, but I was smiling. "Marry me," he said suddenly. I froze. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, turning me to face him. "I know we're already mated. I know the bond is permanent. But I want the ceremony. I want to stand in front of everyone and declare that you're mine and I'm yours. I want you to be my queen in name as well as in fact." My heart was racing. That's a really big decision." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm asking, not telling. What do you say, Amara? Will you marry me?" I looked at this man, this king, who had turned my ordered life into beautiful chaos, who challenged me and supported me and loved me with an intensity that still took my breath away. I thought about the scared girl who'd worked as a housekeeper, terrified of losing everything. And I thought about the woman I'd become, confident and powerful and loved. "Yes," I said, feeling tears of joy prick my eyes. "On one condition." He laughed. "Of course you have a condition. No muddy boots at the wedding," I said firmly. "Deal," he said, and kissed me. Outside the windows, the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The Azure Moon Resort hummed with activity below us, running smoothly thanks to the systems I'd built and the team I'd trained. I'd come so far from that scared 16-year-old girl. I'd built a life, a career, and now a love that would last forever. And it had all started the night I'd tried to throw the Alpha King out of his own hotel. Best mistake ever. Thank you for listening to another Floxy Shifter romance tale. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new romance. What did you think of Amara and Dante's story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the best love stories start with the worst first impressions. Until next time, keep believing in love.